Okay, welcome to episode 15 of the Sean McGuinness podcast. Thank you very much for all the feedback so far. My goal for starting the podcast was to give people helpful information which they could apply to their life straight away. And by the sounds of it, people are getting a lot out of it, even my own clients. It's good to get other people on to reiterate a lot of the stuff I'd say, but obviously people may learn in different ways. So yes, exciting times, and it's not going unheard. So on today's podcast, now this is kind of one of my most favorite / frustrating topics to talk about, but people are kind of misinformed on the topic, so I'll let you away with it. And it is on the topic of motivation. Okay, when it comes to weight loss, fat loss, for some reason we're tied in the industry where people rely on a lot of motivation. Okay, we often hear the phrases, "I need more motivation." I wish I could lose. Okay, welcome to episode 15 of the Sean McGuinness podcast. Thank you very much for all the feedback so far. I love that I have kind of helped pave the way to give people information which they can apply straight away to their life to get results, to feel better, to lose weight, whatever it is. That was my goal from the start, and hopefully we can kick on and keep doing that to spread the good word. Now, in today's podcast, this is probably one of the biggest topics I will talk about. Dun dun dun, drum roll. And it is on the topic of motivation. When it comes to fat loss, we often hear, I wish I had more motivation, that then I could lose more fat, or if only my motivation didn't run out on my last plan, I would be where I want to be. I wish I could hire someone to help me gain more motivation. Okay, and it's the big thing people struggle with, or else they think they do. You're gonna have to keep listening to find out. So first we want to look at what is motivation. Okay, the motivation is actually derived from the word motive, which means needs, desires, wants, or drive within that individual. But when people say they struggle with motivation, okay, they do struggle with motivation, but they probably haven't set their expectations up properly. Okay, because motivation, as you probably heard before, it's the thing that gets you going. And one of the other definitions of motivation, it's the thing to get you to move in that particular moment. It's a state, it's an emotional state that you are now in, the same way someone's happy, sad. Okay, someone's now motivated in that moment. And like any emotion, it's a chemical reaction, and the fact that our brain's releasing a little bit more dopamine, maybe some other feel-good chemicals to make us feel motivated. And anyone has felt motivated knows what I'm talking about when they feel this. And they have the illusion that they're going to always feel like this. Okay, people, we see motivational speakers, okay? I always joke that they're kind of robbing a living, okay? People like Tony Robbins. Okay, obviously Tony Robbins has some good stuff he talks about. He's a little bit smarter than some other ones. But motivational speaking in itself, I just don't think it sets people up with the right expectations on behavioural change, because people go to these seminars, they jump up and down, there's lights, they clap, they feel an emotive state in that moment, and what they felt in that moment doesn't translate to their behavioural change. And ironically, it's the same fucking people going back to these motivational seminars, and even on the topic of self-help completely, because they never fucking apply what they learned. They want to feel that emotive state over and over again. It's like going to a comedian and kind of trying to be happy all the time, where you keep going back and you wish you were in that state all the time. It's impossible. And if your brain was in that state, there's probably going to be something wrong in the fact you're going to get a chemical imbalance. Even as a tangent, like if we look at people with bipolar, There's a miscommunication, a chemical release going on, so they get massive amounts of motivation, creativity at the one time, but then it's followed by demotivation, in which their brain's not releasing enough dopamine and kind of other chemicals like that. Again, I detest, but you get what I mean. So your brain's not always going to be like that. When you feel motivation, it's an emotive state in that particular moment alone. Okay, now motivation. We have heard, and you've probably seen quotes, motivation's the thing that gets you started, habit's the thing that keeps you going. Okay, and that kind of couldn't be more true, but I think it gets so dumbed down from hearing a lot that we don't really actually take it in, what we're reading. Okay, so if we kind of a good way to look at it, which I explain to clients, is from this stages of change model, and it's the model where people will go through to change. Okay, so we kind of have the pre-contemplation stage, okay, where someone doesn't really think about change at all. Then we have contemplation stage, where they're thinking a little bit. Preparation, action, maintenance, and if you don't keep doing what you maintenance, you'll relapse. Okay, now along that journey, if someone may be at different stages, if someone's at the pre-contemplation stage, okay, and it's going to make sense, to stay with it. You're not really thinking about change. You don't really know that, say you have a lot of weight, you've gained a lot of weight. You don't know that's doing any harm. You're unaware, or you don't really care, or it's not causing you any adverse effects in that moment. With someone in that stage, it's not really a case that we want to motivate them, whatever, or if I see a client, it's more a case that you're trying to ask them the questions to figure out that they need to change. Okay, which is why, if anyone has like friends or family where you know that person needs help, by you telling that person in pre-contemplation stage, you need to do this, you need to that, they'll resist more, and they'll resist against the change even more. So that's when, even as coaches, or even if you want to do it yourself with your friends or family, someone, you'll kind of use what's called motivational interviewing, where you're asking questions to get that person on the road. Okay, now next they may go, you know what, there's something actually wrong, my blood pressure's up, I feel I'm uncomfortable in my clothes, it's impacting my relationship. And then they may get onto the contemplation stage, where they're thinking about change. Okay, now in this stage, the pros and cons to change kind of equal the pros and cons to staying the same. So there's no real pain or pleasure point that's exceeding them to change. Okay, again, that's when you might use a little bit more motivation interviewing, ask the question, dig a little deeper, humans, hard emotions, blah 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 blah. Okay, only when I'm going to quote Tony Robbins after I've slagged him a few minutes ago, because as I said, I do think he has some very, very, very smart stuff he talks about. Okay, and he says change will happen when the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change. So when you are so sick of staying in the situation you're in, even though you know change is hard, when that pain of staying the same exceeds the change, the pain of changing, you will change, or you will take action, or you will get into the preparation action stages. And that's kind of what I think of motivation is. It's just when someone enters that stage where they go, do you know what, fuck it, I'm very unhappy where I'm at, and this is having a big impact on my life. I realize what's going on. And most people, again, are more quote unquote motivated by pain than pleasure. You're more motivated by than getting out of the uncomfortable state you are in, versus I want to get in a bikini, because you're not really at that stage yet. Emotional pain is kind of like physical pain when you touch a stove. You just want to take your finger back. Emotional pain is the same. You want to get out of that state straight away. Okay, so what I may get clients to do is I'll have kind of the short-term benefits, pros and cons of staying the same, and the long-term pros and cons staying the same. And I've done this with a client who kind of was insisting that there was nothing wrong, whatever, and all I could do, I'm not going to go against her because she's going to resist it, but I'm just going to ask the questions. And we basically drew this out like a little diagram, like we're back in school. And it was around drinking, and I told the story before, and we had the short-term pros and cons to drinking, okay? And because obviously a lot of pros to be in the situation you're in. The pros, obviously you feel good, you have that Dutch courage, you can talk to people, more social. The short-term negatives, obviously you're hungover, your productivity goes down, your weight gain, you eat bad food. And then we went on to the long-term negatives. Obviously a long list, the amount of money you could have saved, your health, your long-term confidence, because obviously short-term it's good, but long-term it's not going to be where you're at body-wise, health-wise, etc. And then we went on to the long-term positives of drinking. Tumbleweed. Couldn't think of one at all. And that was kind of the moment where she realised, oh, do you know what? Okay, that kind of got her into that preparation stage and action stage. And luckily I was there to facilitate that. But that's where you're at. So in a roundabout way, my version of motivation is when someone gets out of that contemplation stage, they've realized they need to change. That pain is a motivating factor. Again, it could be pleasure. Your goal may be to stand on a bikini. I'm not doubting that, but for a large majority of people that are overweight, that's so far away. They just want to get out of the uncomfortable state they're currently in. So now they're on the preparation stage where they make preparation to actually change. They may join the gym. They may see a trainer. The action stage, where you're actively trying to change or replace behaviors. Maintenance stage, which we're going to come back to as well, because obviously if you do not maintain those behaviors long enough for them to become automatic, you're going to go back into the relapse stage, and then you're going to start all over again. Unfortunately, again, we see this a lot of times with weight loss, a lot of times with smoking, etc., etc. If you do not maintain those habits enough, you've kind of wasted your time, unfortunately. Okay, which brings me on to the next point. When we're looking at motivation, okay, we know people complain, I wish I was more motivated. And I forget who the quote's by. I think it was an American football coach. And he says, you can motivate an idiot, but then all you have is a motivated idiot. Okay? Not calling the listeners of my show idiots. What I'm trying to say is motivation is one thing, but if it's not matched with the same perfect strategy for that individual, well, there's no point in being motivated, because you're not going to have good results. You kind of need both to align. Okay, now we have said motivation is just that state. It's just a starting point to get you to start to change your behaviors. One of the things people do not realize is that motivation is really short term and it's going to fade, especially that initial emotional state. So people get shocked when that motivation goes down. Obviously, if you sign up to a new plan, and I make people very aware when they sign up to my plan that in this moment in time, you are motivated. Your motivation is extra high, let's say, because it's kind of that. It's a novelty. Anything that's a novelty, it's like eating a chocolate at the start. It's a novelty. It's fucking brilliant. But after a while, you may get palate fatigue. Obviously, chocolate, it's probably take a bit longer. But same with like chicken or maybe less palatable food. Anything at the start's a novelty. It's going to release dopamine. You're going to be more motivated when it comes to a plan. And people are. Think of New Year's resolutions. The average is like 21 days. Someone sticks to it. So what we need to realize is that motivation will naturally dip. Okay, because again, for your brain to function properly, you cannot be in that emotional state all the time. So it's naturally going to dip. Again, sometimes about 4 to 8 weeks I normally find from coaching people. Could be a bit longer. It just depends. So there's a few things we need to be aware of. Obviously, we need to be aware of this first. Now, within that, there's what's called the hot-cold empathy gap. And the hot-cold empathy gap is basically one of our many cognitive bias in which people basically underestimate how they're not going to be in that motivated state all the time. Okay, when people start a plan, they think they're going to be motivated all the time to go and train and then to do all these things to prep their food, and they may be for the first few weeks, as I said, but it's not going to be like that. So when people underestimate this, say for example you start a plan, okay, I'm going to train next week 6 a.m. You're motivated in that state. Your alarm goes off. There is not a chance I'm getting out of bed to train now. It's cold, it's 6 a.m, it's dark, it's 6 a.m. Did I say it was 6 a.m? There's not a chance. So in the moment of time when you set the goal, you're quote unquote motivated, but when you wake up you're not motivated. So people, there's a big gap there, hence the hot cold empathy gap. Hot when you're enthusiastic and motivated, and cold when you're demotivated, lethargic, you couldn't think any worse. There's a gap where people don't plan. They don't plan around their environment, and they don't expect it to happen. They feel a bit shocked when they get up and don't feel like training. And I did a little popular Instagram video where especially with social media, we see these people who look fucking fantastic when they train. They're not sweating. They look unbelievable, and we kind of have the expectation that we should be like that. And we see these Instagram people train in the morning. They look fresh. They look happy. They're smiling, and then we kind of are shocked when we don't feel like that. Okay, so it's being aware of this bias, but it's also being aware of the expectation that we're not going to be motivated all the time. And instead, what we need to do is to focus on discipline. Now, self-discipline, it's not saying no to the chocolate when it's right in front of you. It's not really that, which is what people think. Instead, it's being aware that you may not feel like doing something. Or it's not buying into your emotions and the fact that your emotional state is one thing, but you still carry out your habits in spite of how you're feeling. I always say you won't always be motivated. Expect when you start to go training or whatever it is to not feel motivated, but do it anyway. Okay? Because behaviors, your brain loves routine. Your brain loves doing the same stuff, the same habits it's always done. It saves power. It saves like brain power to do new things. It loves habits. It loves routines. It loves doing the same thing. So if you're trying to change your behavior, you've just started a fat loss plan. Forget that you're going to want to do new habits. Your brain doesn't like new habits. It wants to do the same fucking thing it's always done. To replace and change those habits, we need to focus on obviously replacing the routine with a new behavior that's going to align with our goals. I always say stress eating. Someone's stressed, they eat bad food, suddenly they feel de-stressed. Okay, if we want to replace that routine, when we feel stressed, we need to pick something that aligns with our goal but also helps us de-stress. Okay, it could be do a few push-ups, it could be go have a bath, it could be go stretch, go ring your friend, go watch a comedy, etc, etc. But you just need to be aware when it comes to that stress trigger, your brain wants to carry out the same thing it's always done. So you need to use discipline and go, do you know what? I feel like stress eating, but I need to do this other habit, whether I like it or not, whether I'm motivated or not, enough times until that becomes the new norm. Okay, and again, on average, 66 days it takes for it to become a new habit. So just like in the gym, when you're talking about weights, this requires repetition. Okay, and let me tell you from someone who has trained the whole life, now I simply expect to not feel motivated to train. Okay, as crazy as that sounds, I accept that I'm not going to be motivated, but I just do it anyway. Okay, and it's forgetting about your emotions and just doing it anyway, whether it's raining, no matter how you feel. And I always use the example. People go, oh, do you know what? I'm not motivated to train, blah, blah, blah. Okay, think of all the times you have not been motivated to get up and go to work. It's probably every single fucking day. Okay, and you need to use that same mentality. And I always say on top of that, the same way you ring your trainer and go, do you know what, Sean, I'm not really feeling it today, I'm not motivated. Imagine ringing your boss and saying, oh, Mr. Boss, I'm not coming to work, I don't feel motivated. So every time you go and use the excuse in yourself that you don't want to train because you don't feel motivated, imagine ringing your boss and saying the same thing. Okay, it's not going to fly, and that helps a lot of people. So repetition, and like we said, motivation will dip in the first few weeks. Now the problem with this and why people struggle getting to the stage where it's more automatic, like I said, in that stage of change where you're in the maintenance stage, where you're doing things a bit easier, because motivation dips. Let's say for example it dips on the fourth week. Okay, fourth week, it takes a little over 8 weeks for one habit to become automatic. Okay, now in that we have a 4-week gap where people will dip off and they never reach that stage of automaticity, and so it's such a waste. They've wasted the first 4 weeks. So what you need to really focus on is is expecting that motivation to dip, mentally preparing for it. And when you hit that stage, you go, no, I'm going to carry these habits out, whether I feel like it or not, whether I'm motivated or not, whether it's raining or not, enough times until they become automatic. How do I know behaviors become automatic? Because as I said at the start, it's going to be really effing hard, and then it's going to be effing hard, and then it's going to be really hard. Okay, a little bit easier. Suddenly I'm doing it automatic. So you can measure the difficulty of doing the habit as a way to see how your habits are progressing. Okay, it's a nice little way to measure progress along the way and seeing you're on the right lines of that. Eventually you want to get to the stage where you just do that automatic, do the habit without even thinking about it. It's so automatic. It's like when your partner rings you on the way home and they say, oh, can you grab some milk in the garage in the shop? And you go, yeah, no problem. And then suddenly you end up at your door, because habits are things that we basically do at a subconscious level without our conscious brain working. So that's when you should get to the stage. I had a client before, I seen her in the gym. Oh, here we go, Mary. And just as she's about to stretch, you realise she has a doctor's appointment, because going to the gym after work was so automatic for her. Okay, so we want to get around the gap between where motivation dips and the habits become automatic. Okay, now 66 days is on average, but you need to get to the point where you're doing it automatically. So discipline over motivation. Now obviously you're going to say, Sean, of course you need motivation. Okay, I agree to an extent. Okay, I know this is going to make sense. Give me a second. I'm not going back on my words. You need to have in the bit where you start off feeling motivated, the bit where you get to that action stage, that reason is kind of going to be your why. Okay, quote unquote your why. Not to that too much of a cliche, but that's kind of your purpose. Yes, you do need that in the back of your head, but a day is made up of habits. Okay, and you're not always going to remember that. So yes, you're going to have your why in the back of your head. That's going to help you a lot, yes, for sure, but don't rely on it when you're not feeling motivated. Practice doing things, practice self-discipline, practice doing things whether you feel like it and not enough times. Okay? Yes. Okay, so I think I covered a lot there. So let's do a little recap. No, I haven't. Hold on. I knew I was missing something. Okay, so in that stage where your motivation dips and you're trying to get over that speed hump to become automatic, there's a few things you can use. One big thing is obviously accountability, because when you become accountable to someone, you will prioritize those behaviors a little bit more, because you know you have to report back to that person. Again, the same way businesses work. And this is a big thing. So if you find yourself always falling in that first few gap, get a coach, get someone to be accountable to. Obviously get a workout buddy, that's great, accountability buddy, but you probably need someone looking over your food, etc. Whatever you struggle with, that is a big thing. Obviously refer back to the episode I did on habits, where individually you can break down your habits and use habit stacking, habit bundling to put those stuff into practice a little bit more. But accountability is a massive thing here to help you along the way when it comes to that. Okay, that is the base of what I want to cover. So motivation is simply a state. It's simply a state that's going to get you to the stage where you can make actions. Okay, within that we need to have the expectation that motivation is going to drop, and we're going to have to rough it out a bit, where we don't want to focus on self-discipline and forget about motivation and focus on repeating those habits enough times until they become automatic. Like I talked about a bit before, where people expect to be motivated all the time. There's a little quote which is a pretty cool one, where it says, unhappiness is the gap between your expectations and reality. Okay, so if you expect to be motivated all the time, you're going to be very unhappy on a fat loss plan. You're probably going to give up. You have to think in terms of reality and what's actually going to happen, which is what I'm outlining there. Obviously within that, with a hot cold empathy gap, where we're at different states during different parts of the week and day, and although you may feel motivated one time, you need to expect, for example, what we talk about when you wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning, you need to expect, you're not going to feel like getting up and training, but you just need to do it. Okay. And within that, when we kind of acknowledge the hot, cold, empathy gap, we can use ways such as I talked about, where accountability, where if you're going to train in the morning, you may get an accountability buddy to meet you at the gym. You may get a coach to book you in at that time. In terms of your environment, obviously make it easy for you to carry out those habits. Put your gym gear, have your gym gear ready, etc. If you're training at home, have your mat out, etc. And there's a way to construct your environment to make it as easy as possible to carry out those hard habits, the ones you need to do. And you will have that purpose, you will have that why in the back of your head, which is why at the start you may, when you were talking about pain points, you may put that on paper, or you may, if you're going towards more that pleasure where you want to look good, you may have some way of reminding you, just as a little backup when you need it. Okay, it's not that's going to help. Okay, and accountability as a stage to get you over that gap between lack or demotivation when it starts to go down versus when those habits will become a little bit automatic. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So the next time you're going to say, oh, I wish I had more motivation, you go, no, think back over Sean's podcast. Motivation is a short-term thing. We need to then focus on self-discipline and do all these really smart things which he's talked about, and I guarantee that will help you get to your goal. Okay, as I told before, weight loss and fat loss, it's a funny thing. It's the only kind of industry where we talk about like motivation and discipline and self-control, where if you look at your life, you've probably been doing fucking things you don't like and don't want to do your whole life. But this is the only thing, if this is a priority, this needs to be a non-negotiable thing that you just do. The same way you go to work, the same way you brush your teeth, it needs to be on the same spectrum. Okay, there we are. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I covered everything. That's not too much, but some applicable information for you. Please give me your feedback. Please like and share and rate and send to someone when they tell you that little cliched line next to it, wishing I had more motivation. Send them my podcast. Send them on to me. I'll sort them out. And yes, there you go. Signing out, episode 15. I will see you all in the next episode.